In all your research, there's like vast amounts of information that I'm still like learning every time I read part of your book. There's like so much information that's so beneficial, and I think that's what's so amazing about all this research you've done. You've kind of lived it, and you've also like practiced it, and then now here you are like super healthy and can talk about all the benefits of everything. And then with that, is there any tips or advice you can give to like preparing food or like moving into that more of a healthy lifestyle? If you eat, especially if you eat like meat all the time. And
Sure. I think one thing to really recognize is it's a combination of everything. So I'm very holistic. So it's body, mind, spirit. It's your environment as well as the food you eat. And I was married to an environmental trial lawyer for 23 years. So I became very, very knowledgeable about a lot of information that wasn't public knowledge because it was tied up in the courts. So electromagnetic fields, toxins in the air and the water, cleaning products, things like that. So what we put on our skin is just as important as what we put in our mouth because it goes straight to our bloodstream without getting, having anything done to it. And so it can be just as toxic to us as something we eat. So some of the basic things I tell people that I start off with is don't drink your tap water if it's got chlorine and fluoride in it, because that chlorine was the first chemical they developed for warfare to kill people, and it will knock out your immune system immediately. So you want to get a filter to filter your water, and if you can get one that will filter out the fluoride too, which is a little harder to filter out, the fluoride, it isn't even, if it did work, and it's proven it hasn't, if it did work, it's not even the right fluoride, and it is a cumulative poison that will accumulate over time in your bones, and it can cause osteosarcoma, especially in little boys. So, so a key thing is to drink good quality water. And if you have a well or a spring near you, then that kind of water I think can be one of the best because it is usually got minerals in it, and water is a unique element. And so it has a structure to it. And when you can get water from a natural source, that's always ideal. But if you can't, just taking out the chlorine and fluoride is really, really helpful. I don't know if you've noticed, but the chapter in my book on water is extremely comprehensive. And if anybody wants some tips on types of bottled water or how to structure your water or various things like that, really all my books, the vegetarian book, the diabetes book, the Raising Healthy Children's book, they all have really good water information. And since we're 66 to 72% water, and most chronic diseases caused from intercellular dehydration, and focusing on that initially is a great place to start.
I even, from that, it's like thinking about you should drink like half your weight in ounces. That's ideal, right?
That's ideal. But you have to take into account, like say it's getting into summer. If you're eating a lot of things like watermelon that are, got a whole lot of water in them, then you can count that as part of your water too.
Okay, so you started this like 30 years ago when this whole vegan movement or change wasn't even like a thing. So can you talk a little bit about how you've seen the consciousness change, or just the idea of, eating raw and vegetables?
You're so right. 30 years ago when I went vegetarian, it seemed so extreme in Dallas, Texas. Back then, I literally had people yell at me across the table that I was evil. Not kidding you. And I would have to call restaurants sometimes 2 or 3 days ahead of time, or clubs we were members of 2 or 3 days ahead of time, and talk to the chef and find out, what they could make for me that didn't have lard in it, or didn't have bacon in it, or didn't have chicken broth in it. It was really quite remarkable how many restaurants, and really how many are still in Dallas today, that I'll go in and they'll have lard and everything, which is animal fat, or chicken broth and everything. And And I just have to ask them, just like I ask if there's monosodium glutamate in the food. I have to ask them if there's something that I can eat. But it has gotten so much easier and so much more acceptable. And I think so much of it is because of all the research that's been done over the last 30 years that shows that a plant-based diet can reverse heart disease and reverse the effects and reverse diabetes, and also reverse and help prevent cancers. So, that I think has gone to support it. And with half the people in the U.S. today having chronic disease, I know a lot of people come to me for health counseling who've had quadruple heart bypass surgery, or they're in stage 4 cancer and given 2 months to live. And I will tell you, if people do change their diet and stick to it, it's amazing. The body's incredible, and miraculous things can happen. Well, it's really funny is this weekend I went to a reunion for the TV show Dallas. I don't know if you remember that one, but it had JR on it with Larry Hagman and Linda Gray as Sue Ellen Yoon. And I was Larry Hagman's nutritionist and chef when he was struggling with diabetes and cancer. And so I worked with him on his diet, but he had also chosen to do radiation and chemotherapy. And so I was just working in conjunction with what his choices were. And so he was such a dear friend of mine. And so I went to this reunion, and we went to the Longhorn Ballroom, which is a big old Western place where they have live music. And it was really great. A few years ago, you would never have been able to get a vegetarian meal there. Yeah. But they had vegetarian meals there the other night that were very, very good and gluten-free. And anyway, it was so nice to be able to go somewhere like that and be able to eat food. Most of the time in the last 30 years, I would literally eat before I went or take food with me. And I'm not kidding you. Just so that I wouldn't be hungry.
I think it's great that you've been holding this information and like the energy behind it about like this healthy way to live your life, because now people are starting to do that.
One of the things people ask me about frequently when they're wanting to eat a more plant-based diet, and many times they don't want to be 100% vegetarian. And I tell them that's okay. And I know you were asking, what do people do if they have more of a meat-based diet? Well, there was a recent study of 6,000 people between the ages of 50 and 65 across the U.S., comprehensive study. And in this study, they found that people who had the highest amount of creature protein intake, and so that would include dairy, it would include eggs, chicken, fish, beef, any of the what I call creature proteins. Because a lot of times you say meat and people just think beef. And they don't realize that chicken and fish are also considered, a meat. But dairy, eggs, chicken, fish, all of those creature proteins, they act very differently in our body. And what they found in this survey is that people with the highest amount of protein intake from creatures were 75% more likely to die of any disease. Wow. 4 times more likely to die of cancer, and 5 times more likely to die of diabetes. But if the people had a high intake of protein from plants, it was the complete opposite. They were 75% less likely to die of any disease. Mm-hmm. And so what I've found from my research is that it's not protein that people are needing, it's the complex amino acids. And plants are readily available with these complex amino acids, which are the building blocks of protein, and your body can utilize that right away. When it's creature protein, your body quite literally has to work really hard to transform that protein into the complex amino acids that your body needs to function properly. Your body doesn't need protein, like we've all been brainwashed over the last 50 years in the world to believe that it really is it's those building blocks that we need. And so now I'm seeing people who have depression or different health problems, and they're getting complex amino acid treatments, and that just makes so much sense to me, because if they are eating a high creature protein diet, they're not getting enough of the various complex amino acids that can prevent depression or things like that. One of the things I know has been a really big problem is the depression in this country, and so many people are on antidepressant drugs. But there's one complex amino acid that's 5-HTP, 5 and then H, T, and P, and that's a great supplement that you can take that can literally lift your mood and help you feel better. And so that's L-theanine is another one of those, and those are very, very helpful. But also, I think, like when I met Larry Hagman, he had been trying to eat a vegetarian diet to help reverse his cancer, and he said, I'm just starving to death. I just don't feel like I'm getting enough food. And then one reason I wrote my book, How to Be a Healthy Vegetarian, was simply because I had so many people coming up to me saying, I used to be a vegetarian, but I just couldn't do it anymore. I just felt hungry. I just didn't feel like I had enough energy. So one of the reasons I wrote my book is that I felt like I had really figured out how to be a healthy vegetarian. I'm an O blood type. My daughter's an O blood type. I know there really hasn't been the in-depth research on the blood types of things, but according to them, I would be 100% meat eater. Yeah. And yet I thrive on a plant-based diet. But I do know how to prepare the proteins properly so that they don't cause gas and they don't have the phytic acid in them that can block your body from absorbing nutrients. And so in my recipes, I don't know if you noticed this, but I do the steps on how to get rid of the phytic acid, how to remove the enzyme inhibitors in plant-based foods so that you can digest them more effectively and they taste better. and then they also work better in your body that way. I think really over the last 50 years, the meat industry and the dairy industry, they were just so huge with their lobbying groups. They've just convinced us we needed all of this animal protein, but yet, if you can prepare them properly, and I think also people really just didn't know how to prepare them properly, and you go to eat out at a restaurant and you're not removing the phytic acid from their beans or their lentils or things, and they may be harder to digest. So I think just having more of the protein, carbohydrate, and fat in your diet is a way to feel more satisfied. And in all my recipes, I include that information and how to do that. And the fat actually tells your body how to use the proteins and the carbohydrates. So it's really important to have that whole symphony of foods in your diet so that they can work synergistically. And I think that's one of the best ways to have a healthier vegetarian diet or vegan diet. And then also, if you're ever doing a recipe where it calls for meat or some kind of creature protein, substitute mushrooms for that, because mushrooms are incredibly helpful for you. And in fact, a university in Australia did a study that found that people who ate fresh mushrooms every day had a 65% less chance of getting cancer. And that's pretty impressive. And they said also if you add green tea to drinking, drink some green tea every day, then it went up to like 90% prevention of cancer. So, just some simple little things like that can be really delicious are an easy way to do that. And the mushrooms can give you that little meaty kind of flavor that you might be craving when you're trying to switch. And also they can be grilled. And I know a lot of people like to get out and grill on holidays and they think, what am I going to have when they're all having hamburgers and hot dogs? And take a big portobello mushroom with you and have that. And it's really makes a great hamburger.
With all this information, you talked about proteins and how you prepare. How did you learn all that? Like, was it just trial and error or learning from chefs, or like what exactly got you to where this research that you're talking about?
What's interesting is I had actually studied quite a few things as a chef in my young youth, and then as I grew older, and especially when I started researching nutrition, I just continued on that. And I'm trying to remember where I learned that, but I stumbled upon it in something, and I knew, and I've been doing this kind of instinctively for the last 30 years. I'm like, I'm not digesting these beans or these lentils properly, and how can I make it better? And so I would like soak them and sprout them before I cook them, which is really what removes the enzyme inhibitors and also can make it have less of the phytic acid. But I was also boiling them, bringing them to a boil, and then pouring off all the water and then boiling them again. So I was breaking it down so it was more digestible. If you really sprout them well, though, you don't have to bring them to a boil and pour off the water and do that twice, because that can be a lot of extra work. And so my books kind of tell you an easier way to do it that's not quite so time consuming. But also, I think adding combinations of things like the right kind of salt to your diet and the right kind of fat, and also to these recipes, makes a big difference in how your body's able to digest them properly. And as I started researching just different things about plant-based foods, and then taking more classes on the healing diet of eating plant-based foods, it just all started coming together and making sense for me.
Well, I just want to say thank you for doing all that research, because like in your books, it's amazing all the info and how clear, and like the recipes are so beneficial.